17 minutes ago. Erdogan did this for Ukraine. Turkey struck with a diplomatic sword. It seems Moscow will no longer be able to get back on its feet. Zelensky proposed something that Istanbul definitely won't refuse, a triumph that can't be hidden. Fedorov saw the matter through to the end. No, because now there are no more Shaheds. The air defense reform worked 100%. The Russians themselves are refusing to launch drones at Ukraine. A result that everyone is applauding. Kyiv is taking control of the Strait of Hormuz. Ukrainian drones will do it on command. Putin is waiting for a stab in the back. The Kremlin nervously watches as Ukraine makes the world bow before it. Moscow, get ready. Ours are unleashing ballistic missiles that will turn the tide of events. The countdown has begun. A decisive week for Orbán. Budapest is on standby. Hungary packed Russia's bags and pointed to the exit even before the election results. All this in our episode of Hell Point. Sensational news. Zelensky came to Istanbul for a reason. Turkey and Ukraine outplayed everyone. Zelensky and Erdogan have reached a new level of agreements. Ankara is no longer balancing, but is confidently taking Ukraine's side. The pressure is increasing and Putin's room for maneuver is rapidly shrinking. The real game against Moscow is entering a survival phase. The situation is changing right before our eyes, and for the Kremlin, this is definitely not the scenario they were counting on. Could it be that Erdogan will put a full stop where Trump put a comma? Let's watch.
Zelensky is in Turkey again. However, this time it wasn't just about peace negotiations. Now Ukraine is a full-fledged ally and security partner. On his Facebook page, the Ukrainian leader stated that the relevant decisions at the state level have already
every necessary adjustment and final modification required for this specific project has finally been successfully completed and officially implemented after a very long and thorough review process by the entire team involved.
Here, analysts say it's important not just to sell your products, but also to sign long-term contracts. And in dealings with Turkey, it's important to build cooperation wisely so that the partnership doesn't turn into competition.
Ukraine and Turkey are producing drones. Looking ahead toward the coming years, this essentially means that the ongoing provision and distribution of advanced drone technologies to the Middle East region should be managed so they do not have any sort of detrimental effects or a negative impact on the overall stability of the area. Negatively affect the partner, from the Ukrainian side. But Ukraine has extensive experience in conducting combat operations. This is already a bit different because producing a drone is not always enough to defend against a drone.
At the same time, perhaps the main question is, what can Ukraine offer? It's not just the drones themselves, but also the experience of countering drones and missiles using cheaper methods than those typically used in NATO. This is, so to speak, a turnkey air defense model. Something that Ankara, which has already repelled Iranian missiles 3 times, is extremely interested in today.
This includes tactics, electronic warfare systems, detection systems, and anti-aircraft systems. In other words, how to shoot them down. And overall, the organization of modern combat, how to act in the kill zone. With relatively small and specialized tactical forces, and significantly more affordable and accessible technological equipment, it is now entirely possible to fight against conventional, heavy-duty traditional military weapons, including highly advanced, well-trained armies, equipped with sophisticated helicopters, armored tanks, and so on, all of which can be quite effectively neutralized, using much cheaper and more versatile drones.
The topic of negotiations also came up during the president's meeting. Zelensky and Erdogan confirmed that Istanbul could become the new venue for a trilateral meeting in this format. Ukraine, USA, Russia?
Negotiations were held in Turkey in 2022, as we can recall, and also in 2025. They began in the summer, specifically in Turkey. Moreover, Turkey, unlike the UAE, took a more active role. The Minister of Foreign Affairs was essentially the moderator of the negotiations.
It is worth noting that earlier, the Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council, Rustem Umerov, decided to visit Turkey. There he held a meeting with the Turkish Minister of Defense, Yaşar Güler, where they discussed developments in humanitarian and defense cooperation between Kyiv and Ankara. However, analysts believe that was not the only topic of discussion.
I am deeply convinced that there are so-called facade topics that he discusses in Turkey. At his own level, at the level of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and at the level of the Minister of Defense. This also includes Turkey as a negotiation platform, and it also concerns prisoner exchanges. But I firmly believe that there are also topics that do not make it into official media reports.
Among these, for example, experts mention the overall role of Ukraine in the Middle East. After all, a lot has changed since the end of the war in Iran. In particular, this concerns trade, defense, maritime transport, and more. This is where Kyiv gets a chance to become a full-fledged player in the region. And it's better to discuss this in advance.
The president's visit to Turkey. This is not just about comprehensive discussions on diplomatic peaceful mediation efforts, strategic military cooperation, or mutually beneficial economic relations. During this visit, I am sure the Iranian war and the shifting balance of power in the Near and Middle East were discussed. East. Ukraine is a key player on the Asian map. This is a moment that in principle allows us,
in fact, to talk not just about international subjectivity, but about a certain soft power that Ukraine possesses.
In exchange, Ukraine is already receiving a reliable partnership with Turkey, which has once again confirmed that it does not dispute our territorial integrity, and judging by recent meetings, will obviously take a more active role as a peacemaker.
This can no longer be hidden. Fedorov made a spectacular entrance and tightened the screws on Russian attacks. The Shahids have finally come to an end. Ours are setting new records. Russian drone operators are in a panic. They are now the targets. There will be no more warnings. The air defense reform is now operating at full capacity. The Kremlin is nervous. This is far from what Putin wanted to see. Could it be that after such a failure, Moscow will be forced to announce the end of the missile and drone terror against Ukraine? Let's watch.
Shahids are now banned from flying. Ukraine is concreting the defense of its skies against Russian strike drones. In March, the occupiers launched a record number of drones, but the Ukrainian armed forces also set a record.
Monthly UAV infographic. Mine 136. Geranium-2 Gerber. March results. Record. A total of 6,462 units. 5,833 or 90% shot down. 629 or 10% hit the target. The average number of launches per day is 208 units. Plus 15%.
The secret of the success of the Ukrainian Defense Forces, interceptor drones. According to Commander-in-Chief Oleksandr Syrsky, in the spring the effectiveness of combat missions of unmanned interceptors increased by almost 55%. Since
the beginning of spring, our interceptor UAVs have already destroyed more than 2,300 enemy aerial targets. The enemy does not stop its attacks. On the contrary, it is increasing production, modernizing drones, and improving their use.
After Mikhailo Fedorov was appointed Minister of Defense, Kyiv made significant progress in the development and implementation of unmanned systems. Today, the Ukrainian defense industry produces dozens of different types of interceptors. Some, like Octopus or UEB-1, operate based on artificial intelligence. Others, like Sting, can be remotely operated by an operator from hundreds of kilometers away.
An absolute world record. A pilot shot down a Shahed using a Sting interceptor at a distance of 500 kilometers. Using Hornet vision control technology, Roman Hulk from the Bulava unit shot down 2 Shaheds that were 500 kilometers away from him.
But it's not just about the interceptors. Countering Russian instruments of terror is carried out in a comprehensive manner. Surface-to-air missile systems, helicopters armed with missiles, as well as ground-based systems have not lost their relevance. Mobile fire groups are also in use. In addition, businesses and private companies have joined in the defense of Ukrainian airspace, as the government has allowed them to create their own air defense units.
The experimental project launched by the government to involve the private sector in the air defense system is already being implemented and is yielding its first results. One of the companies participating in the project has already prepared its own air defense group. As of today, several enemy drones have already been shot down in the Kharkiv region, including a Shahed by the Zala group.
The armed forces of Ukraine also do not forget about the best defense tactic: attack. Over the past week, drone system forces have carried out at least 3 successful strikes on Shahed launch sites.
At this very moment, while the world is panicking, Kiev is taking everything into its own hands. Ukraine is entering the Strait of Hormuz. Allies are watching with fascination and trying to muster the courage for a fateful step. Zelensky acts without any courtesies. A harsh blow to Iran, the shockwaves of which are reaching Russia as well. Ukrainian drones are setting a precise course for the Indian Ocean. Moscow has no idea what fiery surprise could engulf it at the most unexpected moment. What are our people planning? What signals are our allies sending about these ideas? And will these maneuvers succeed in bringing global evil to its knees? Don't miss it. Iran has blocked the Strait of Hormuz, causing significant logistical problems for global trade. According to the International Maritime Organization, about 2,000 vessels are currently blocked in the waters of the Persian Gulf.
Overall, it should be noted that this is probably one of the world's most pressing problems right now. At the same time, the United States has proven unable to independently restore the passage of ships through this strategically important region. And this has a significant impact on the entire global economy. So it seems that now everyone is looking for some alternative ways to ensure free navigation through this very strait.
At the same time, it is reported that a number of specific vessels that are currently linked to Iran, China, India, and Pakistan still have the ability to pass through this highly critical and strategic waterway.
This incredibly vast and intricate network of interconnected navigable channels functions as a critical inland waterway system, facilitating essential transportation, large-scale commerce, and industrial logistics across the entire geographic region for many years. Therefore, the United States does not have much time to demonstrate the effectiveness of its actions.
Ukraine possesses the necessary expertise in the field of maritime routes, their protection, and the restoration of navigation. This was emphasized by the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky.
If our partners are ready to act, we will consider how we can strengthen them, how we can contribute our expertise, knowledge, and technological potential. Now, it is impossible to imagine real security without Ukraine. I thank everyone who understands this.
A day earlier, during a virtual meeting of representatives from 40 countries on ensuring freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz, Ukraine's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Andriy Sybiha, emphasized that there is a direct connection between the situation in the Middle East and Russian aggression against Ukraine. According to the minister regarding the issue of the Strait of Hormuz, Iran has the same objectives as Russia does in the Black Sea, to destabilize global markets and blackmail others.
The regimes in Moscow and Iran are inseparable and pose the same threat to Ukraine, Europe, the United States, and the countries of the Middle East. The terrorist regimes are sharing their experiences. What Iran is doing today in the Strait of Hormuz, Russia did yesterday in the Black Sea. The problem is that Iran has learned from Russia's mistakes and drawn its own conclusions. Moscow tried to turn food into a weapon in the Black Sea when it attacked grain ships. And now Iran is trying to weaponize oil in the Strait of Hormuz. There are no longer any isolated regional conflicts. Ukraine's combat experience is valuable for the Middle East. Global security is interconnected.
According to military expert Oleksandr Musienko, Ukraine, for its part, truly has reasons for punishment. Iran.
The Iranians shot down a Ukrainian plane even before the full-scale Russian invasion. People died, the crew perished. The Iranians did not admit that it was their two missiles, even though the evidence has not been refuted. That it was Iran, they did not allow Ukrainian experts in. Then they started supplying Shaheds, which flew in and killed peaceful Ukrainians, destroyed our infrastructure, property, and homes.
Ukraine is directly interested in the stability of global markets and in ensuring that the Russian Federation cannot use instability in the Middle East to finance its aggression.
The idea that our drones could appear in Hormuz and then move from the Strait of Hormuz into the Gulf of Oman and even into the Indian Ocean, and they actually destroy the Russian shadow fleet, is taking on new shape. It still could be realized. The next target should be the shadow fleet. We need to tackle it.
Political scientist Petro Lishchuk is convinced that Ukrainian assistance in unblocking the strait is truly necessary. And
perhaps, if the US had taken Ukraine's offers of assistance more seriously, it probably would have helped both the US and everyone else. Ukraine is one of the few countries that, in this situation, is offering help to the US. even though it is not an ally of the US and does not have any alliance treaties with the US. But obviously, in this regard, Trump's organization is following more of Trump's personal attitudes and emotions, which are very skeptical toward Ukraine rather than the interests of the US.
But that's not all. According to an investigation by France's RFI, Ukraine has established ties with the government of Libya in Tripoli and has created a stronghold that now threatens Russian ships passing through the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea via the Suez Canal. 2 Libyan sources reported that the presence of Ukrainian military personnel was agreed upon with the government headed by Abdelhamid Dbeibeh.
More than 200 Ukrainian officers and experts have been stationed in Libya under an agreement with Dbeibeh's government. They are working at 3 main sites, including the airbase in Misrata.
The Ukrainian contingent is distributed across 3 sites. The first is at the airbase in Misrata. The second is located in the Melita area, 50 kilometers from the capital. The third is in the Tripoli airport area. In
the Melita area, a fully equipped base for launching drones has been established. All the work was carried out in the fall of 2025.
According to sources, Ukraine has already attacked Russian ships in the Mediterranean Sea twice. On March 4th, they attacked the gas carrier Arctic Medegas. The vessel was struck by a Magura V-5 maritime drone, which was launched from the Melita area. And in December 25, a Russian tanker Quendil was attacked by a maritime drone from the territory of Misrata, 250 kilometers off the coast of Libya. According to the publication, representatives of the Wagner PMC and the Russian GRU were on board. As a result of the strike, 2 people were killed and 7 were wounded. Among the dead was General Andrei Averyanov, a high-ranking officer of Russian intelligence. So you over there in Russia don't get too comfortable. The most interesting part is yet to come. A sensation. Red Square in Moscow being cleared out by Ukrainian ballistic missiles. This is what Putin feared the most. Hundreds of our missiles, precisely aimed at the Kremlin. This is why we saved the FP9. Dictator Ria, the new bunker is just the beginning. FP-7 kicks off something shocking. The European anti-ballistic shield. Ukraine has pulled off the incredible. This is victory. You have to be the first to see these epic shots. Ukraine is preparing a weapon capable of reaching the very heart of Russia.
Lubyanka needs to be wiped off the face of the earth simply.
I like the way you think.
Lubyanka wiped off the face of the earth. There is a huge number.
General Staff, Ministry of Defense.
General Staff, Ministry of Defense. Moscow oil refineries. Almaz Ante, Krunichev Communications, Strela.
Red Square wouldn't hurt to clean up either.
Clean it up, yes.
Clean it up.
By the middle of 2026, Ukrainian developers promise to take their own ballistic capabilities to a new level.
The first ones should go in directly, like kids going to school.
We're talking about the FP-7 and FP-9 missiles, which are capable of radically changing the geography of the war. If today the strike range is limited to hundreds of kilometers, then in the coming months the range will increase to 850. And that's enough to threaten not only the border regions, but even
the city of Moscow itself. Russia is truly and effectively demonstrating our impressive capabilities.
And we're not just talking about pinpoint strikes, but about the potential for massive use. According to the developers, dozens of missiles can be launched simultaneously, 20, 30 or even more. And in such a case, even modern air defense systems become overloaded. Intercepting such a stream of targets becomes a task at the very limit of capability, even for top-tier systems, like Patriot, let alone the Soviet-era systems in Russia.
It's hard for them to intercept such missiles.
Each of these missiles fulfills its own task on the battlefield. In combat, together they form a new strike architecture, FP-7.
The very first successful launch, which was a fully confirmed and verified one, took place in Taganrog, when we successfully hit the A-50 aircraft inside the hangar, which had recently come in for some kind of extensive technical refitting and maintenance work.
This ballistic missile is considered a more close-range tool. Its range is up to 300 kilometers, the warhead weighs up to 250 kilograms, it has high accuracy and relatively low cost. It's
the kind of replacement for Atakimis, but cheaper.
Such a missile allows for the systematic destruction of enemy depots, headquarters, and logistics deep behind the front lines. The FP9 is a completely different level. Its range is up to 850 kilometers and the warhead weighs up to 800 kilograms. And this is essentially a transition to a fully fledged operational tactical ballistic missile. This is about striking strategic targets, from military facilities to key infrastructure deep inside Russia. Both missiles are launched from the same mobile launcher similar to the one used for the Flamingo system. This means rapid deployment, stealth, and the ability to quickly change positions, making detection and retaliatory strikes more difficult. Moreover, the European anti-ballistic shield will be built on the basis of the FP7 missile.
We are now planning to create a pan-European anti-ballistic shield based on the FP7 because this missile,
This thing
has a vertical launch, descends quickly, is highly maneuverable, and it is originally designed to intercept ballistic targets.
In addition, FPV drones the size of the Flamingo missile will appear in Ukraine. Another step towards expanding the range of non-strike means. And while Ukrainian developers are ramping up their own capabilities, in Russia things are quite different. They have only developed methods of intimidation. And the well-known ballistic missile Oreshnik turned out to be useless in modern warfare.
It's a shortened intercontinental missile. They just cut off one stage. Medium-range missiles are designed to carry nuclear warheads. They are not capable of carrying conventional weapons, and nobody needs that. It's just an attempt to show that they can launch something. Oreshnik, well, good for them. It only makes sense to use such missiles for nuclear weapons.
Ukraine proves it once again. What matters is not the number of people or kilometers on the map, but the ability to build a system step by step. A system that turns technology into real results on the battlefield. And it seems that very soon Russia will fully experience the appeal of Ukrainian innovations.
The final stretch, the decisive week before the elections in Hungary. Orban is stressed, his levers of influence are shaky, more unstable than ever before. The bet on the Kremlin didn't work out. The moment of truth has come. Hungarians are driving Moscow out of Budapest. The countdown has begun. The Hungarian Prime Minister is on edge. In his entire political career, he has never faced a situation like this. So in the end, who will prevail? The first shocking insights are coming up. Don't miss them.
The Hungarian elections are at the center of global attention. During his time in power, the notorious Prime Minister Viktor Orbán has managed to get involved in so many scandals that the world community, and Ukrainians in particular, are awaiting his resignation like manna from heaven.
It turns out that little Hungary, with its 10 million inhabitants, actually has a completely disproportionate influence on the entire course of global politics.
However, Orbán has no intention of giving up so easily. The Hungarian Prime Minister is clinging to power with all his might, using the dirtiest and most unscrupulous methods of struggle. And it is worth noting that even some exemplary democratic states are helping him in this.
This whole situation, to put it mildly, is paradoxical, or perhaps more accurately, it is absurd, because it's not just Russia that's involved in all of this. We all remember that Marco Rubio has already visited Budapest, has already supported Orbán. We know that Donald Trump has repeatedly declared his full and unconditional support for Viktor Orbán in the upcoming election. And now we hear again from American historians, what now? J.D. Vance is planning to go to Budapest in April, right before the elections. But in any normal situation, this would probably be called interference in the internal affairs of another state.
But the United States is far from the only one supporting Orbán and doing everything possible to keep him in power in Hungary. The main friend of the Budapest Prime Minister is the Russian dictator Putin. And that's because since the beginning of 2022, Hungary has openly pursued a pro-Russian policy. So aggressively, in fact, that today, this EU country can be considered a satellite of Russia on the international stage. Since the beginning of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Orban has personally met with Putin in Moscow twice. And during this period, his foreign minister has visited the Russian capital as many as 16 times. Instead, the bunker sends its oil and gas to Hungary, as well as the best political strategists to conduct the election campaign.
All of the different groups and various parties that are currently involved in this specific situation. Viktor Orban is a prominent political figure who, starting back in 2010, has successfully participated in and won probably half a dozen different elections across various levels of government, ranging from local contests to national parliamentary votes. She won by a large margin, gaining more votes than the entire opposition each time taken. And at the same time, unlike Turkey or Russia, it elected without resorting to electoral manipulation. If there's anyone to learn from, it's how to win elections. Viktor Orban and his Fidesz party.
Analysts assure that this is exactly what will ultimately ruin Orban and his party. By betting on the Kremlin, the Hungarian Prime Minister has signed his own political death warrant. In a situation where the war in Ukraine could spill over to the rest of Europe at any moment, no one in the West is going to coddle Orban anymore. They are not going to. On the contrary, foreign politicians are happily shaking his seat. Under the Hungarian Prime Minister, everything is...
The situation is unfortunately becoming increasingly unstable as time goes on. On one hand, they are slow and not radical, but on the other hand, they are effective.
Hungarians themselves are also dissatisfied with their leaders' policies. At pre-election rallies, NATO is increasingly chanting, "Russians go home."
Russia, Russia, and the expansive territory of Russia.
This slogan is very familiar to the Kremlin. Appearing during the Hungarian uprising of 1956, the loud call was directed against Soviet troops. Thank you. In 2026, it is addressed personally to the pro-Kremlin Prime Minister. Protesters officially declare that if Europe does not punish the corrupt Orban in court, the people themselves will do it, but already on the streets.
But unfortunately, so far, there has not been a single case that has reached such a level where not only charges were brought, but also evidentiary decisions were made. But this case may happen soon.
Orban himself understands this very well. After the failed attempt to stage an assassination attempt on himself and the disastrous, carefully planned Kremlin-backed election campaign based on hatred towards Ukraine, his party will not be able to win the parliamentary election scheduled for April 12th. And that means that Viktor Orban's time is up as well. By betting on an openly anti-Ukrainian stance, the Hungarian Prime Minister, he turned everyone and everything against himself, ultimately achieving even greater unity among his own people and the collective West, against the ideas of the Russian world, which Orban tried to implement in the very heart of Europe.
Everyone understands that leaving Ukraine one-on-one with Putin financially would be, first and foremost, a defeat for Europe itself, of course, for Ukraine as well. Europe will lose the vast majority of its money if, for example, 20 million Ukrainian refugees head to Europe and a war breaks out, say, in Lithuania. In that case, of course, Europe would lose not $50 billion, but $50 trillion. No one wants that.
That's all for now, and that's everything. This was me, Darina Hatsakalo, with you. Even more hellish news awaits in our next episode. In the meantime, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. See you soon.